When Daniel Harper drove back into Coldwater, the streets felt smaller than he remembered. 30 years had passed since he'd last seen them, yet the curve of Main Street, the leaning old lamppost by the post office, even the warped wooden bench outside Weller's Diner were just as they'd been when he was a boy. Time had smoothed some corners but left others untouched, as if the town itself didn't know whether to move forward or stand still. His uncle's house stood 2 miles past the edge of town, beyond where the pavement broke into gravel. A Victorian thing, 3 stories, a turret on one corner, and a wraparound porch with sagging railings, sitting alone on a slight rise, half-choked by trees that had grown thicker since Daniel's childhood. It was the kind of place people called picturesque in the daylight and creepy at night. He remembered the creak of the porch boards, the smell of his uncle's tobacco smoke, and a faint hum in the walls that no one else seemed to hear. Now Uncle Walter was gone, and the property was Daniel's to sell. That was the plan. Sign some papers, clean out what was left, and hand it over to a realtor. He'd told himself it was a simple errand, 3 days at most. But as soon as he parked in front of the house and stepped out of his car, the air pressed against him like a damp cloth. It smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was dry. He was locking the trunk when an old pickup slowed on the road. The driver, a man with a face like weathered stone, leaned out the window. "You heading up to Walter's place?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. I'm his nephew." The man's eyes narrowed. "Don't stay there tonight." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. Before Daniel could respond, the pickup rumbled on, disappearing around the bend. Inside, the house greeted him with the thick stillness of a place that had been waiting too long. Dust drifted in thin shafts of sunlight through lace curtains. The floorboards groaned under his weight, though the sound didn't echo, almost as if it was absorbed into the walls. He moved slowly, trying not to disturb whatever fragile balance lingered here. The living room was exactly as he remembered it. A green velvet sofa, a heavy oak cabinet full of old glassware, a fireplace with an iron poker leaning beside it. The air smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, even though no one had smoked here in decades. He touched the mantel and his fingers came away gritty with dust, yet the smell was fresh, almost recent. As he moved through the rooms, Daniel began to notice small things that shouldn't have been there. In the hallway, a single child's marble lay on the floor, its glass surface catching the light. Upstairs, in the room that had once been his when he visited as a boy, the bed was made, not in the stiff way of an unused room, but with the sheets slightly wrinkled, as though someone had smoothed them just an hour before. And on the desk by the window sat a wooden box. He knew that box. He hadn't seen it since he was 10. It had been theirs, his and the house's. The memories came back in fragments. He'd been a lonely child, spending long summer weeks here while his parents traveled. Uncle Walter was often busy, leaving Daniel to wander the house and its grounds. That was when he'd started talking to it. At first it was only in whispers, pretending the house could hear him. But then sometimes it had felt like the house whispered back. Not in words exactly, more in feelings. A presence in the stillness, answering without sound. The box had been part of a game. He'd leave something inside, a coin, a scrap of paper with a drawing, and the next day it would be replaced with something else. He never saw who or what did it. Eventually, he convinced himself it had been Uncle Walter humoring him. But now, 30 years later, the box sat there, lid closed, waiting. He almost didn't open it. But curiosity was stronger. Inside lay a single object, a small brass key. He didn't recognize it, but the instant he touched it, a faint shiver ran up his arm, like the aftershock of static electricity. That was when the second warning came. It was near dusk when Daniel went into town to grab some groceries. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, froze when he gave the address for his receipt. "You're not staying there tonight, are you?" she asked quietly. "I am," he said. "Why?" She glanced around as if to make sure no one was listening. "People don't stay past dark. Not unless they have to." "What happens after dark?" but she only shook her head, muttering, "Just be careful," and turned to the next customer. By the time he drove back, the sun was sinking behind the hills, turning the sky the color of bruised peaches. The trees along the gravel road seemed taller, their branches knitting together overhead. When he parked in front of the house, the first thing he noticed was that one of the upstairs windows, the window to his old bedroom, was open. He hadn't left it that way. Inside, the air felt warmer, as though the house itself had taken a breath and was holding it. Shadows clung to the corners, reluctant to move even when he turned on the lights. He cooked himself a simple dinner in the old kitchen, trying not to think about the way the floor seemed to subtly shift beneath his feet, like the gentle roll of a ship. It was just after midnight when the whispering began. At first he thought it was the wind, soft, almost soothing, but the sound came from inside the walls. A low hum rising and falling, forming shapes that weren't quite words but weren't meaningless either. Daniel sat in the living room, listening, his pulse in his ears. The whispering wasn't threatening. If anything, it felt welcoming, urgent but not hostile. The brass key lay on the coffee table. In the dim light, it seemed to glow faintly. Daniel picked it up without thinking, and the whispering grew clearer, threading into his mind in a way that bypassed his ears entirely. "Stairs. 3rd floor. Behind the door." He hesitated only a moment before obeying. The 3rd floor of the house had always been off-limits. Uncle Walter kept it locked, telling Daniel it was full of old junk and unsafe to explore. But now, at the top of the narrow staircase, Daniel found a small door at the end of the hall, one he didn't remember. The brass key fit perfectly into its lock. The room beyond was small, with slanted ceilings and a single round window looking out over the dark lawn. Dust lay thick on the floor, but in the center sat something that was not dusty at all. A low wooden table, and on it, a second box, larger than the first. This one was carved with symbols Daniel didn't recognize. The whispering urged him closer. He opened the box. Inside lay a stack of drawings, each on yellowed paper. His breath caught. They were his sketches he had made as a child. Houses, trees, strange twisting shapes he couldn't name. He'd forgotten all about them, but here they were, preserved as if they mattered. Beneath the drawings was a single empty page. The whispering grew sharper now, almost impatient. "Finish it." Daniel's hands trembled. He didn't know what he was supposed to draw, yet as he sat at the table, a memory unspooled, of sitting here as a boy, pen in hand, feeling the house watching. He remembered how he'd always meant to draw one last thing, but had been called away, leaving the picture unfinished. Now the house was waiting for him to complete it. His pen moved almost on its own, lines forming curves, curves becoming shapes, shapes becoming something that felt both familiar and alien. The more he drew, the warmer the room became, until the air shimmered faintly around him. When the last line was finished, a deep silence fell. It wasn't emptiness, it was satisfaction. The house sighed. Downstairs the front door creaked open. Daniel froze. He hadn't locked it. Footsteps crossed the threshold, slow and deliberate. But he felt no fear, only inevitability. The whispering had stopped, but the sense of presence remained, stronger now, filling every inch of the air. He descended the stairs, each step careful, until he reached the foyer. Uncle Walter stood there. He looked exactly as Daniel remembered him. Tall, broad-shouldered, eyes like pale glass. But his skin had the faint translucence of something lit from within. He smiled, and it was the same smile Daniel had seen 100 times as a child. "You came back," Walter said softly. "And you finished it." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. The warmth in the air swelled, wrapping around him. He understood now. It hadn't been Walter who'd played the game with him all those years ago. It had been the house. Walter had been only its caretaker. And now Daniel had taken his place. Walter reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "It's yours now. Take care of it. It's been waiting a long time." Then he was gone. The door stood open to the night, But the darkness outside felt vast and unwelcoming. Daniel closed it and turned the lock. The house settled around him like a living thing. The air hummed softly, content. Somewhere deep in the walls, the whispering resumed. Not urgent this time, but calm, almost protective. Daniel knew he would not be leaving in the morning. The thought of selling the house was gone, erased as if it had never existed. This was home. It always had been. Outside, the night stretched on. Inside, the house waited. Not for him to leave, but for whatever would come next. And Daniel, sitting in his old room with the box on the desk and the key in his pocket, waited with it.
Emma had always loved her small apartment in the heart of the city. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom on the 6th floor of an old brick building. But to her, it was home. The windows caught the soft afternoon light, and at night, the hum of distant traffic and the occasional siren created a lullaby she had grown to find comforting. The walls, worn with time, whispered the stories of all who had lived there before, but Emma liked that. She believed every old place held secrets, stories waiting patiently for the right person to discover them. The bathroom was tiny, with white tiles and a mirror that hung above the sink in a thin, silver frame. Nothing special. Emma used it every morning and every night, brushing her teeth, washing her face, fixing her hair. She looked into that mirror hundreds of times and never thought twice about it. Until the night, she first noticed something wasn't right. It was late autumn. Emma had come home after a long day at work, exhausted but content. The city was quiet, wrapped in the soft fog that had settled over the streets. She moved to the bathroom to wash her face before bed. As she leaned over the sink and looked into the mirror, she thought she saw something strange out of the corner of her eye. Behind her reflected image, the bathroom mirror showed more than the bathroom. It showed her bedroom. The door between the bathroom and the bedroom was firmly closed, locked even. But in the mirror's surface, the bedroom was there, dimly lit by the bedside lamp, the sheets neatly made, the chair by the window still empty. Emma froze, her fingers gripping the edge of the sink. She slowly turned around. The door was shut just as she had left it. No gap, no crack. Her eyes flicked back to the mirror. The bedroom remained silent and still, as if the mirror was not simply reflecting what was in front of it, but revealing another layer, another dimension. For a moment, a cold shiver ran down her spine. Then she shook her head and whispered, "It's nothing, just tired eyes." But that night, as she lay in bed, the image of her bedroom behind her in the mirror haunted her thoughts. She couldn't sleep. She kept imagining that the mirror was showing her things that didn't belong to her reality. The next morning, Emma avoided the mirror. She brushed her teeth without looking into it, even washed her face using the reflection in the window pane instead. But the image stayed in her mind, persistent like a whisper she couldn't forget. Over the next few days, the mirror continued its strange trick. Sometimes it reflected only the bathroom. Other times, it showed the bedroom behind her, even with the door firmly closed. Sometimes, she thought she saw shadows moving in the bedroom that weren't there when she turned around. Emma tried to tell herself she was imagining things. Stress from work, lack of sleep. It had to be. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching her, waiting. One night, around midnight, she awoke thirsty. The apartment was dark except for the faint orange glow of streetlights outside. She padded to the bathroom, turning on the light and filling her glass from the tap. She looked up into the mirror. The bedroom was behind her, as always. But this time, a dark figure stood near the bed, tall, silent, and motionless. Emma's breath caught. She spun around, heart pounding wildly. Nothing. The bedroom was empty. She looked back into the mirror. The figure was still there. Frozen, she whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. The figure remained, an outline in the dim light, its eyes impossible to see. Then, from the mirror, came a voice, low, cold, and strange. Emma. It was not her voice. It was deeper, older, and full of something she couldn't name. Her knees shook, and she grabbed the edge of the sink. "This isn't real," she said, though her voice trembled. "Emma," the voice repeated. Tears welled in her eyes. The figure stepped closer in the mirror, the pale face beginning to take shape, hollow eyes and a cruel smile. Emma stumbled back, terrified, and fled the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She sat on the bed, trying to breathe, trying to convince herself it was a nightmare. But sleep wouldn't come. The days that followed grew harder. The mirror's strange behavior worsened. It no longer just showed the bedroom behind the door. It showed things she couldn't explain. Glimpses of a little girl laughing alone in the dark, a man's shadow watching silently from a corner, a door slamming shut with no one around. Emma's world grew smaller. She stopped answering calls. She stopped going out. The apartment's walls pressed in tighter every day. One evening, her best friend Mia came over. Emma, desperate for someone to understand, told her everything. The mirror, the voice, the figure. Mia listened, concern wrinkling her brow. Emma, maybe it's stress or lack of sleep. Maybe you should see a doctor. Emma wanted to believe her, but the mirror's pull was too strong. She could no longer pretend it was just her mind. One night, she stood before the mirror, heart pounding. The glass rippled beneath her fingertips, and a voice whispered not just her name, but a story. It told her a promise made long ago, a secret buried beneath the apartment floorboards, an unfinished business that bound Emma to this place. Emma didn't understand, but the mirror showed her images, a hidden trapdoor beneath a faded rug, a dusty cellar, an old journal filled with secrets. With trembling hands, she pulled back the rug in her bedroom. Beneath it was a small wooden trapdoor she had never noticed. She opened it and found a narrow stairwell spiraling down into darkness. Flashlight in hand, Emma descended. The cellar was cold, musty, filled with forgotten things. Boxes, broken furniture, and a faded leather-bound journal. Emma opened it. The pages told of loss and regret, written decades ago by someone who had lived in this very apartment. A story of a family torn apart by betrayal, a child lost and never found, and a promise to keep a secret safe. The final entry warned, the reflection is a key. Trust no one but yourself. Suddenly, the cellar door slammed shut. Emma gasped and spun around. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows. Emma, a voice whispered from the dark. She was trapped, caught between two worlds, the real and the reflected. The mirror wasn't just glass. It was a doorway to something waiting, something patient, something that knew her name. Emma's fight to escape the past and herself had only just begun.
The first snow that winter came early, in mid-November, settling over the roofs of Gray Hollow like a promise. The townsfolk said it was a good sign, the kind of winter that would keep the soil wet for spring planting, the kind of snowfall that made the world beautiful again. People walked slower through town, smiling at one another, brushing white flakes from their shoulders as they stepped into the diner for coffee. But Gray Hollow had always been a place where beauty could turn on you quick. By the end of the first week, the snow had thickened into something that didn't melt. It fell in slow, heavy curtains, day after day, until it lay piled against doors and windows, hiding the fences, swallowing the small hills. The road that wound out of the valley was already closing, the county plow running out of salt and fuel. People still thought it would pass. It didn't. The winter of 1979 lasted longer than anyone expected. It wasn't just that the snow fell, it was the way it seemed to close us in, like the whole world had been reduced to this valley, the scattering of homes and shops, with the mountains standing like sentries around us. The first disappearance happened after the second week. Old Mr. Petrowski lived at the far edge of town, just past the Treeline. He was quiet, kept to himself, but everyone knew him. He had a habit of stacking his firewood with military precision, splitting logs until well after dark. The day he went missing, people noticed the smoke from his chimney had stopped. It was the footprints that made folks uneasy. They were found by Charlie Finch, who'd gone up to check on him. The prints led out of the woods to Petrowski's back door, long, deep strides, pressed down in the snow like whatever made them was heavy. The strange part was the shape. They weren't boots. They weren't even bare feet. The edges were blurred, as though the snow itself had sunk away from them. The prints ended at the porch. No return trail. No signs of Petrowski leaving his house. The sheriff organized a small search. They found the back door open, the inside of the house cold, the fire long gone to ash. A cup of coffee sat frozen on the kitchen table. His heavy coat still hung on its hook. The next week, it happened again. This time it was the Dawson couple who ran the diner. The footprints were there again. Same size, same strange sinking in the snow, leading to the door and no farther. Inside, the stove was cold, a pot of stew half served into 2 bowls, the spoon still in them. After that, people started staying in after dark. Nobody answered unexpected knocks. Nobody went outside alone, especially not near the woods. But the thing about the snow is that it plays tricks on your hearing. Some nights you'd swear you heard footsteps crunching slow circles around the house. Other times it was faint tapping, like fingers brushing the glass. The third week, the snow buried Gray Hollow, so deep the roofs looked like small humps in a white desert. There was no more going down to the city, no more delivery trucks. We were on our own. It was around then that my parents were taken. I was 19. My name is Daniel Hale, and I'm the only one who walked out of that winter alive. My folks lived in a small blue house near the creek. That day, I was at the church helping stack firewood with some of the older men. The snow was coming down so thick you could barely see across the yard. When I made it home, the door was wide open, snow swirling inside. The lamps were still lit. My father's boots sat by the wall. My mother's knitting lay in her chair, the needles mid-loop. And the footprints were there, leading up to the porch. I didn't stay. I went straight to my Uncle Henry's place, above the hardware store, and didn't look back. Henry was a big man with a quiet voice, the kind who'd seen enough bad winters to know when to keep his head down. He boarded the door, kept the fire going round the clock, and made me swear not to open the door for anyone after sundown. But one night in the 4th week, the knocking came. 3 slow raps, a pause, then 2 more. Henry froze, his hand halfway to the shotgun. We didn't move. The snow outside made the sound dull, like it was coming from far away, but I knew it was just on the other side of the door. Then the voice came. "Henry, it's cold out here. Let me in." It was my mother's voice. I turned to look at Henry. He shook his head, his eyes locked on mine, and whispered, "It's not her." The voice came again, closer now. "Please, Henry. I'm freezing." We sat there for what felt like hours. The voice didn't call a third time. In the morning, when we dared to look, the footprints were there again, pressed deep in the snow, ending right at the door. Henry was gone 3 nights later. There was no sound that time, no knocking, no voice. I woke to the cold draft of the front door swinging open, snow blowing in. His bed was empty. His coat and boots were still there. I lasted alone another week. I stopped sleeping much, keeping the shotgun close. Some nights I'd hear faint movement outside, slow and deliberate, like someone pacing the perimeter. Other nights there was nothing at all, just the oppressive silence of the snow. One night, I woke to the sound of breathing in my room. Slow, measured, almost curious. I stayed perfectly still, afraid to even blink. After a long moment, the breathing stopped. In the morning, the window was open, snow piled on the sill. No prints on the floor. No marks outside. When the thaw came in early March and the state troopers made it up the mountain, they found me in the church. I'd moved in during those last days, barricading the doors, sleeping by the altar. The rest of the town was gone. Every house stood open. Meals half eaten, fires gone to cold ash. I told the troopers nothing about the footprints or the voices. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life explaining something no one would believe. I left Gray Hollow the day they cleared me to go. I went south, found work, tried to forget. I built a life. I married. I had kids. For decades, I didn't go near the mountains. Then the letter came last week. It was in my mailbox, no return address. The paper inside was yellowed, the handwriting shaky. Just 4 words. Help finish the tally. There was a map of Gray Hollow folded inside, the old church circled in red. Now here I am, 46 years later, standing at the base of a snow-covered road into the valley. The trees are black against the white, the wind cutting through my coat. The snow is falling harder now, like it's been waiting for me. As I take my first step onto the road, I hear it. 3 slow knocks, a pause, 2 more, and somewhere ahead, through the curtain of snow, I think I see footprints waiting to be made.